Welcome, dear subscribers and curious listeners of my channel. Ron Weasley is a character many people unfairly dismiss as useless. Sadly, most viewers remember him as the guy who's always chewing something, making funny faces or freaking out about spiders. Next to brilliant Hermione and brave Harry, Ron really could seem like the odd one out, thrown into the films just for comic relief. And how many times has he been called the weak link, a coward? Fans even turned Ron doesn't deserve Hermione into their favorite pastime discussion. But as is so often the case, the books paint a much deeper portrait. To be honest, I myself had forgotten how interesting Ron really is. Without him, Harry Potter would be a completely different story. And today, I'll prove it to you by breaking down the differences between Book Ron and Movie Ron. Let's go. Number 1, a true Gryffindor. Gryffindor is the house of the brave. And Ron didn't end up there by accident, but sadly, the films robbed him of many scenes that could have shown his real courage. In the Prisoner of Azkaban adaptation, he's essentially just a random victim of the Grim. But in the book, Ron chooses to shove Harry out of harm's way and takes the blow himself. That's the act of a true friend. If you want to kill Harry, you'll have to kill us too. Prisoner of Azkaban. In the films, these kinds of moments were often handed to Hermione, which made Ron look weak by comparison. But in the books, we see a completely different character, someone willing to stand by his friends until the very end. Number 2, the caring, good-hearted friend. Ron knows when and what to say. His kindness and thoughtfulness often surfaced at exactly the moments when Harry or Hermione were at their lowest. Remember Hagrid, whom he simply gave tea to. Ron was also the first to truly help Dobby by giving him clothes. He even suggested Ginny should go to the Yule Ball with Harry instead of himself, sacrificing his own reputation for the sake of his friend. Mum always makes tea when someone's upset. Prisoner of Azkaban, this Ron isn't comic relief. He's a friend you can rely on. Number 3, one of them. In the books, Ron is the true guide to the wizarding world. Unlike Harry and Hermione, he grew up in a magical family and knows countless things his friends and the readers would otherwise miss. In the films, this role was often shifted to Hermione. As a result, viewers missed out on many moments where it was Ron explaining things to Harry, like the meaning of the word mudblood or why wizards feared Voldemort's name. Come on, I'll explain in the castle. Goblet of Fire. Through these moments, Ron's inner world was revealed, his prejudices, habits, and lived experience within the wizarding community. Number 4, quarrelsome Weasley. Let's not forget Ron's hot temper. He's the most quarrelsome of the trio. His fights with Hermione and Harry are well known, but in the books these conflicts are shown with much more depth. Ron often struggles just as much as his friends, and he's usually the one who looks for reconciliation. You're not doing this alone anymore. I'll help you, Hermione. Prisoner of Azkaban. This makes him feel real and human. In the films, however, we mostly see the surface level of the stubbornness and sulking without the inner struggle. Number 5, emotional range. Ron is the most emotional member of the Golden Trio. He flares up easily, defends his friends, and isn't afraid to snap at Malfoy or even Snape. His emotions are the fuel that drive many scenes forward. Think back to the moment when Bellatrix was torturing Hermione. In the book, Ron literally screams himself hoarse, while in the movie, he looks far too calm. Ron is emotions, humor, anger, kindness, jealousy. The films flattened all of this, leaving behind mostly silly faces. Number 6, key moments. Still, it's worth noting, Rupert Grint played Ron wonderfully. His expressions became iconic. The problem wasn't the actor, it was the script. which reduced Ron to Harry and Hermione's comic sidekick. But in the books we see a real person, complex, vibrant, funny and touching, a hero without whom the story of Harry Potter would never be the same. Number 7, strategist and tactician. Ron's brilliance shines brightest in the chess match beneath Hogwarts. It is not just about moving pieces, it is about strategy, foresight, and the willingness to command under pressure. He positions Harry and Hermione with precision, knowing exactly what role each must play. When the moment comes, he does not hesitate to sacrifice himself so the others can continue. Rowling captures it perfectly. "Ron, you don't have to," began Harry. "Of course I do," said Ron fiercely. "That's why it's you two and not me. Nobody else can do it." This is not the voice of comic relief. It is the voice of a leader who sees the bigger picture. The films give us the spectacle of stone pieces colliding, but they strip away the essence of Ron's tactical mind. In the books, this scene defines him as more than a sidekick. It shows that he can read danger, weigh risks, and make decisions others cannot. His courage lies not only in charging forward, but in thinking ahead, in playing the game to win, even when the cost is his own body. This is Ron Weasley, the strategist, a truth the screen never fully allowed us to see. Number 8, a leader, not a shadow. Ron is not just a follower. In the books, he often becomes the one who steadies the trio when everything threatens to fall apart. When Harry doubts himself before the Triwizard tasks, it is Ron who brings him back with blunt honesty and loyalty. Later, in Order of the Phoenix, when the entire school mocks Harry for claiming Voldemort's return, Ron stands firm. Rowling writes, "If one person says it's true, then I'll believe it's true, and that person is Ron." He does not need the spotlight. His strength is in keeping the group moving when despair takes hold. The films almost erased this leadership. On screen, Ron looks like comic relief, while Harry and Hermione drive the story. But in truth, Ron was the glue holding them together. Without him, the trio would have broken apart long before the Horcrux hunt. His leadership is quiet, born not of speeches but of presence, the kind that says, "I'll be here no matter what." It is subtle, but it is what kept them alive. Number 9, son of his family. Ron Weasley grew up in a house filled with giants of personality. Bill was the cool curse-breaker, Charlie the fearless dragon tamer, Percy the ambitious prefect, Fred and George the unforgettable pranksters, and Ginny the adored youngest. By the time it was Ron's turn, every role seemed already taken. Rowling shows this pressure again and again, making it clear why Ron so often struggles with self-worth. His confession in Deathly Hallows is heartbreaking. "All my life I've been overshadowed. Bill was the clever one, Charlie was the popular one, Percy was the ambitious one, Fred and George were the funny ones, and Ginny was the baby, and me, I'm Ron, just Ron." This sense of being just Ron drives much of his behavior. His bursts of jealousy toward Harry are not only about fame, but about watching his best friend step into the spotlight that Ron secretly dreams of. His sharp words toward Hermione sometimes come from the same place, a fear that she will choose someone more impressive, like Victor Crumb. In truth, Ron's temper, his insecurities, and even his humor are all colored by the shadow of his family. Unlike the films, which reduce him to comic relief, the books let us see the weight he carries every time he compares himself to his siblings. And yet, this burden makes his victories even sweeter. When he becomes keeper for the Gryffindor Quidditch team, when he helps destroy Horcruxes, when he wins Hermione's heart, these are not just plot points. They are triumphs of a boy who always felt second best, proving to himself that he is enough. The films never gave us this deeper family context, but in the books, It is the quiet heartbeat of Ron's entire story. Number 10. The shadow of jealousy. Ron's jealousy is one of the most misunderstood parts of his character. On the surface, it looks childish. He envies Harry's fame and Hermione's brilliance. But in the books, this jealousy is deeper. It shows the pain of a boy who has always lived in the shadow of others, his brothers, his best friend, even the girl he loves. It makes him flawed, yes, but also painfully real. The clearest moment comes in Goblet of Fire. When Harry's name comes out of the goblet, Ron does not believe him. He feels betrayed, as if Harry finally found a way to steal even more attention. Ruling captures the bitterness. "You're the youngest Triwizard champion there's ever been. You're famous already. Imagine if you won. You'd be even greater than you are now." For Harry, this feels cruel, but for Ron, it is a cry from someone drowning in insecurity. The films show Ron sulking, but they strip away the anguish of a friend who feels left behind. Hermione is another wound. Ron cannot help but compare himself to her. She always has the answers, always wins the teacher's respect. He masks it with sarcasm, but beneath the jokes is admiration mixed with envy. When she goes to the Yule Ball with Victor Crumb, Ron's jealousy explodes. "You're fraternizing with the enemy," he spits. But the anger is not about Quidditch rivals. It is about Hermione choosing someone else, about Ron realizing he may not be enough. And yet what makes Ron remarkable is that he grows past it. In Deathly Hallows, after leaving Harry and Hermione in anger, he returns. His voice breaks when he admits, "I wanted to come back the minute I'd left. I just didn't know how." This is not a spoiled boy, but a young man who faces his demons and comes back stronger. His journey is about learning that jealousy does not define him. Love and loyalty do. That journey is missing in the films, but in the books, it makes Ron unforgettable. Number 11, romantic and loyal husband. Ron's romance with Hermione is one of the quietest yet most powerful threads in the books. It does not burst into existence with a single kiss. It grows slowly through arguments, jealousy, and loyalty. In the films, their relationship is reduced to awkward gags and sudden affection, but on the page, every step feels earned. Ron's clumsy attempts to impress Hermione, his irritation with Victor Crumb, and his inability to express what he feels, these are the marks of a boy trying to become a man. The Yule Ball in Goblet of Fire is where the tension sharpens. Ron watches Hermione walk in with Crumb, and for the first time he understands what she means to him. His reaction is raw. He blurts, "You're fraternizing with the enemy," and storms off, ashamed of his own jealousy. It is not noble, but it is real. That sting of envy lingers for years, shaping the way he sees her and the way he struggles with his own insecurities. By Deathly Hallows, the slow burn finally ignites. In the chaos of the Battle of Hogwarts, Ron and Hermione argue about freeing the house elves. Hermione pleads, and Ron, never known for eloquence, manages to say the words that reveal his heart. Rowling writes, "There was a clatter as the basilisk fangs cascaded out of Hermione's arms. Running at Ron, she flung them around his neck and kissed him full on the mouth. It is not just passion. It is years of laughter, quarrels, and unspoken devotion breaking free." The film played this as a sudden, almost comedic release, but in the books it is the culmination of everything. Ron's love is messy and human, born of flaws and forgiveness. And when the dust settles, he is no longer the insecure boy in his brother's shadow. He is Hermione's partner, her equal, the loyal husband and father who proved that love is not about perfection, but about staying, fighting, and growing together. Number 12, humor as a weapon. Ron's humor is often misunderstood. In the films, it became his defining trait, but it was flattened into silly one-liners and awkward faces. In the books, though, humor is his armor. It is the way he keeps fear at bay, the way he protects his friends from sinking into despair. He does not joke because he is shallow. He jokes because it is his survival instinct. When Harry trembles before the first task in Goblet of Fire, Ron does not give a lecture or a plan. Instead, he grins and says, "If you're not in the hospital wing by the end of the day, we'll celebrate. If you die, can I have your firebolt?" It is reckless, absurd, and exactly what Harry needs. For a moment, Harry laughs, and the crushing weight of the dragon ahead becomes bearable. Ron's words are not empty, they are medicine. For panic. Time and again, Ron uses humor to pull others back from the edge. When Hagrid breaks down in Prisoner of Azkaban, it is Ron who blurts out, "I'll put the kettle on. That's what Mum does when someone's upset." Simple, clumsy, but it works. Even when danger surrounds them, Ron finds a way to make the unbearable feel lighter. Without that balance, the trio would collapse under the strain. The films never captured this nuance. They framed Ron's humor as comic relief for the audience, not as a weapon against the darkness within the story. On the page, his jokes are shields. They show a boy who is scared but refuses to surrender to fear. Behind every laugh he sparks, there is defiance. And that defiance is what makes Ron Weasley more than a sidekick. He is the heart that keeps the others standing. Number 13. The Dark Side. Ron Weasley was never written as flawless. In the books, J.K. Rowling gives him weaknesses that make him painfully human. He envies Harry's fame. He bristles at Hermione's brilliance. He can lash out with cruel words when he feels cornered. These flaws are not meant to diminish him, but to ground him in reality. Ron is not a polished hero. He is a boy learning how to handle jealousy, pride, and insecurity while growing up in the shadow of stronger personalities. The best example of this comes in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. The trio carries Slytherin's locket, a Horcrux that feeds on their fears. For Ron, the locket whispers about everything he already believes, that Harry is destined for glory while Ron is expendable, and that Hermione secretly prefers the chosen one. The text makes his torment vivid. Ron's face contorted, as though every word the locket spoke struck deep inside him. He isn't throwing a tantrum, he is drowning in self-doubt, magnified by dark magic. The breaking point is brutal. Ron storms out, abandoning Harry and Hermione in their darkest hour. On the page, it is not written as a shallow quarrel, but as a collapse under unbearable pressure. "I thought you knew what you were doing," he shouts at Harry. "We thought you had a plan." His words cut with rage, but beneath them lies despair, the cry of someone who feels useless and forgotten. It is a powerful scene of weakness, but also of truth. Ron voices the fears neither Harry nor Hermione dare to admit. In the movie, this moment is softened and almost trivialized. Viewers see Ron sulk, argue, and then leave, as though he was simply sulking over teenage jealousy. The raw agony of the book is stripped away. On screen, he looks petulant. On the page, he looks human. That difference is what makes the literary Ron unforgettable, a flawed boy who stumbles, falls apart, but eventually finds the courage to return. Would you like me to now expand this section with how his return redeems him and completes his arc? Number 14, Hero in the Shadows. Ron Weasley is one of those characters who, when viewed only through the films, appears to be the comic relief, the sidekick, the boy who stumbles, shouts, and panics. Yet in J.K. Rowling's original books, Ron is given depth, loyalty, and courage that often surpasses the spotlight moments of Harry or the brilliance of Hermione. The distortion lies in the way the films cut down his role, pushing him into the background, and sometimes even handing his heroic moments to other characters. The result is a cinematic version of Ron that lacks the quiet heroism of the boy who stood by Harry when others faltered, who understood danger with an instinct born of fear and loyalty, and who carried burdens that few noticed because they did not shine with glory. Take, for example, the Chamber of Secrets. In the book, Ron's role is crucial. When the Ford Anglia crashes into the Whomping Willow, it is Ron who remains resilient, taking Harry back to the castle. Later, when Hermione is petrified, Ron's loyalty never wavers. In fact, he is the one who continues to push Harry to solve the mystery, despite his own grief and fear. And when they finally find themselves before the entrance to the chamber, it is Ron's broken wand and failed spells that embody his struggle, not his uselessness. The book shows that despite his shortcomings, Ron stands his ground. In the films, however, he becomes almost a burden, reduced to screaming in fear of spiders and whining about danger, rather than being recognized as the one who remembered the path out of Aragog's lair, saving both himself and Harry from certain death. The line in the book is clear. Without Ron, Harry would never have found his way out of the forest. The moment in the Forest of Dean during the Deathly Hallows is one of the clearest examples of how the films misrepresent Ron's character. In the book, it is Ron who destroys the locket Horcrux after pulling Harry from the icy waters of the pond. The locket torments Ron with visions, telling him he is worth nothing compared to Harry, showing him Hermione with Harry in cruel illusions. And yet Ron does not collapse. With trembling hands, he strikes the locket with the sword of Gryffindor, proving that he has the strength to face his own worst fears. Harry himself tells Ron, "The sword was made for you, Ron. It only takes in that which strengthens it." In the film, this is presented briefly without the depth of Ron's torment, making his moment appear accidental rather than a triumph of will. In the book, his action is not comic relief, but a symbolic overcoming of years of insecurity. Another distortion comes from the chess game in The Philosopher's Stone. Ron's sacrifice is one of the most heroic acts in the early books. He rides into danger, knowing he will be knocked unconscious to allow Harry and Hermione to proceed. His strategy wins the game, and his selflessness secures their path. Rowling makes it clear that Ron's love for chess is not a childish hobby, but a talent that saves lives. The book describes it vividly. "It's you that has to go on, Harry, not me, not Hermione, you." Yet in the film adaptation, this moment is reduced in intensity, with less weight given to Ron's strategic brilliance and more focus on Harry. What could have been the defining moment of Ron's early heroism is trimmed into an almost secondary scene, diminishing its emotional power. Ron's instinctive caution is another aspect stripped from the films. While Harry is often reckless and Hermione relies heavily on logic, Ron represents the voice of experience born from his family's struggles and his own fear. In The Goblet of Fire, Ron warns Harry against trusting too easily, reminding him that fame attracts danger as much as admiration. When Harry is chosen as champion, Ron feels betrayed, but beneath his jealousy lies the sharp intuition that forces Harry to prove himself again. His suspicion is not weakness, but awareness. Rowling shows how Ron often senses when something feels wrong, even if he cannot articulate it with Hermione's precision. In the films, however, his instincts are brushed aside as insecurity or foolishness, robbing him of one of his most important qualities, the ability to balance Harry's recklessness with a grounded sense of reality. There is also the matter of loyalty, something Ron embodies more than any other character. He leaves, yes, but he always comes back. In the Deathly Hallows, his departure from Harry and Hermione is painted as a betrayal by the films, but in the book it is layered with humanity. The Horcrux amplifies his fears, twisting his perception until he can no longer bear the weight of being second best. But the moment he returns, drenched and shaking, Rowling allows us to feel the depth of his remorse. He tells Harry, "I wanted to come back the minute I'd gone. I just didn't know how to find you." This is not cowardice, but the truth of someone crushed by his insecurities, who nonetheless finds his way back, choosing love and loyalty over despair. In the film, this moment is minimized, and his return feels like convenience rather than redemption. Number 15, protector of the family. Ron Weasley in the books is never just the comic relief that the films tried to mold him into. His identity is deeply rooted in family, and that thread runs through all 7 novels like an unbreakable scarlet line. From the very beginning, the boy who meets Harry on the train is not simply a sidekick, but someone who constantly defines himself through loyalty to those he loves. His bond with the Weasley family, and later with Harry and Hermione, becomes the foundation of his courage. In the films, this depth often disappears, reduced to jokes, awkward jealousy, or clumsy mistakes. Yet in the novels, J.K. Rowling made it clear that Ron's heartbeat is tied to the people he protects. One of the earliest demonstrations comes in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, when Draco Malfoy mocks the Weasley family for being poor. Ron reacts instantly, not with witty words, but with the raw instinct of a younger brother who has lived his entire life defending his household's dignity. He is ready to fight, wand raised, because he cannot bear an insult against Arthur, Molly, or his siblings. Harry observes this fierce loyalty, and it becomes part of why the bond between them grows so fast. "He's not worth the trouble, Ron," Harry tries to calm him, but readers already understand Ron cannot remain calm when his family honor is attacked. This protective streak grows stronger in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. When Ginny is taken into the chamber, the films give Harry the spotlight as the sole rescuer, but the book emphasizes Ron's desperation as a brother. He hurls himself at the task, even as the collapsing passage in the tunnel separates him from Harry. Ron would have gone first if he could, because Ginny is not just another student. She is his little sister, and Ron's terror is palpable. Rowling describes his frantic attempts to move the rocks, his frustration, his helplessness at being unable to follow Harry. That scene makes it clear that Ron's first instinct is sacrifice. It is this same fierce instinct that defines Ron during the Quidditch World Cup in Goblet of Fire. When the Death Eaters terrorize the campsite, Ron is less concerned about himself than about finding his siblings. In the chaos, his thoughts are not about escape alone, but about making sure Ginny and the twins are safe. This instinctive need to keep his family together, even in panic, gives his character a gravity the films rarely show. Cinematic Ron is often presented as bumbling or oblivious, but literary Ron is always scanning for danger to those he loves. His anger when others mock the Weasleys is another sign of this protective fire. In Goblet of Fire, Draco sneers about Molly's second-hand dress robes, and Ron boils over with humiliation and rage. His fists clench, his voice cracks with fury. Rowling writes that Ron went red as a beetroot and lunged for Draco before Harry held him back. That fury is not vanity. It is not about his own pride. It is about the people who raised him, the siblings who share the patched clothes and hand-me-downs. Ron's loyalty is visceral. The audience in the film sees him roll his eyes at poverty jokes, but the book gives us the living truth of a son who would gladly throw himself into a fight to defend his mother's honor. What makes this trait so important is that it bleeds into his friendships. Harry and Hermione become an extension of Ron's family, and he treats them with the same instinct to shield and to protect. In Prisoner of Azkaban, when Sirius Black is believed to be a murderer coming for Harry, Ron literally places himself between danger and his friend. With his broken leg, he still drags himself in front of Harry, shouting that if Sirius wants to kill Harry, he will have to kill Ron first. It is a moment of astonishing bravery, and it grows out of the same soil as his defense of Ginny. He protects Harry because Harry has become his brother. Later, in Order of the Phoenix, Ron's new role as a prefect is mocked by Fred and George, but beneath the jokes lies something the twins respect: Ron's determination to guide and guard younger students. He may doubt himself constantly, but he steps into responsibility because caring for others has been etched into him since childhood. The prefect badge is not about academic excellence. It is about character, and Ron's character is built on being the one who never lets family walk alone. The battle at the Department of Mysteries in the same book again reveals how films stripped away his strength. Book Ron fights with a savagery born of loyalty, standing shoulder to shoulder with Harry and Hermione. He is injured, confused, bewitched into laughter by a curse, but still presses forward until he collapses. Even in pain, his loyalty never wavers. He fights because his friends are fighting, because leaving them would be unthinkable. In Half-Blood Prince, when Harry insists that Draco is up to something dark, Ron's loyalty to both his friend and his sister is on display. He may doubt the evidence, but his protective streak never allows him to dismiss the possibility that danger could reach Ginny. He warns her, he argues with her, he even tries to police her relationships, not always wisely, but always from the same place of fierce care. Ginny resists his interference, but Ron's impulse is not control, it is protection. Number 16, becoming an adult. Ron Weasley's story in the books is not the tale of a comic sidekick, though that is what the films often reduce him to. In the cinematic version, he is the boy who stammers, panics, eats endlessly, and serves as comic relief to the calm bravery of Harry and the sharp intellect of Hermione. Yet in J.K. Rowling's writing, Ron is much more. His journey is one of becoming, of stumbling through jealousy, insecurity, and fear, until he emerges with maturity, courage, and the ability to put others before himself. The difference is stark, and it robs movie audiences of the powerful arc that belongs to Ron. In the novels, his growth is often subtle but persistent, shaping him into a man worthy of the loyalty of friends and the admiration of readers. In the first book, Ron is 11, and he is painfully aware of what it means to be overshadowed. Surrounded by brothers who are smarter, cooler, or more accomplished, he clings to Harry's friendship as both an escape and a chance to stand out. At this age, he dreams of glory, of perhaps one day being head boy or winning the House Cup. When he first lays eyes on Harry's firebolt much later in the series, his awe and longing reveal how much he craves symbols of success. But what matters more is how the boy who once fantasized about trophies and brooms slowly learns that true achievement lies in loyalty and sacrifice. By the end of the books, Ron does not measure himself against his brothers. Instead, he makes choices defined by his own heart, not by comparison. The movies miss this inner conflict. For instance, in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, the book gives Ron the pivotal chess game, a moment of clarity where he sacrifices himself on the board so that Harry can advance. He tells Harry, "You've got to go on, Harry, not me, not Hermione, you." It is not a laughable act. It is deadly serious, an act of courage from a boy who understands, even at 11, that sometimes the best way to win is to fall. The film portrays the chess scene, but without the gravitas, it is easy to brush it aside as merely clever teamwork, rather than Ron's first true step into adulthood. By the second book, The Chamber of Secrets, Ron's bravery is sharpened through fear. He faces his worst phobia, spiders, in the dark forest with Harry, and though his terror nearly paralyzes him, he goes. The text describes his trembling and his stuttering, but the real triumph is that he acts anyway. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to continue in spite of it. The film, however, plays this encounter almost entirely for comedy, turning Ron's horror into a joke. What the screen does not capture is that this moment plants the seed of Ron's resilience. He learns that he can survive his fears, and he will carry that lesson into darker days. The third book, The Prisoner of Azkaban, deepens Ron's role as the loyal defender. When Sirius Black is revealed in the Shrieking Shack, it is Ron lying broken-legged on the floor, who snarls, "If you want to kill Harry, you'll have to kill us too." He cannot even stand, yet he places himself as a shield. In that instant, the boy who once dreamed of glory does not care for recognition. His only instinct is to protect his friend. The film offers this moment, but it trims away the intensity, leaving the audience with a faint echo rather than the thunder of Ron's loyalty. In the book, this is no throwaway line, it is a defining declaration. By the Goblet of Fire, Ron's weaknesses surface sharply. His envy erupts when Harry's name comes out of the goblet. The rift between them is raw, cruel, and humiliating for Harry, but it is also a vital moment for Ron. He struggles with the unbearable shadow of being the friend of the boy who lived. For the first time, the reader sees him fracture under the weight of his insecurities. Yet this fracture is crucial. It shows that Ron is human, flawed, and wrestling with emotions far more complex than comic cowardice. The reconciliation is just as telling. When Ron comes to Harry, sheepish but sincere, he learns to admit mistakes and repair broken bonds. This lesson, humility and reconciliation, is one of the most mature steps he takes. The films rush through this, reducing the conflict to teenage sulking rather than an exploration of what it means to grow through envy. In the Order of the Phoenix, Ron is given responsibility he never imagined, becoming a prefect. The choice shocks even him. Harry, who assumes he will be chosen, is passed over, and Ron is left blinking in disbelief. The appointment is not arbitrary. It is Dumbledore's way of telling Ron that leadership and responsibility can be his if he chooses to rise to it. Ron struggles with authority, and at times he feels inadequate, but this is the seed of a man who will one day lead. The films mention this in passing with little focus, as if it were irrelevant. Yet for readers, this is a quiet but significant shift. Ron is being told that he matters not as Harry's friend, not as the sixth Weasley, but as himself. Number 17, wizard on equal footing. In the books, Ron Weasley was never the clownish sidekick that the films tried to mold him into. J.K. Rowling crafted him as a wizard who might stumble, might doubt himself, but who always found a way to stand shoulder to shoulder with Harry and Hermione when the danger grew real. The cinema versions often replaced his quick wit with comic relief, and his magical skill with bumbling accidents, leaving the impression that Ron was incapable of matching the others in spell work. Yet when we return to the pages, we see a very different portrait. The Ron of the novels is not simply tagging along. He is a fighter, a strategist, and a wizard who knows how to wield his wand effectively when it matters most. One of the clearest examples comes in The Order of the Phoenix, when the trio battles in the Department of Mysteries. The films reduce this tense sequence to a few flashes of chaos, but in the book, Ron's presence is anything but ornamental. He fires off spells, stuns enemies, and resists against adult Death Eaters, who, by all rights, should have overwhelmed the students. Rowling describes the battle with lines that leave no doubt about Ron's involvement. Jets of light flew in all directions, and Harry ducked to avoid a jet of green that came close to his face. Ron was beside him, his own wand flashing, sending back curses as fast as he could. These are not the actions of a boy who cannot keep up. They are the signs of a wizard holding the line against some of the darkest forces in the magical world. The sixth book, The Half-Blood Prince, also grants Ron moments of magical competence that never found their way into the cinematic lens. During the duel with Cormac McLaggen at Quidditch practice, Ron's reflexes and spell work demonstrate that he is far from clumsy. Later, in the fight against Death Eaters who infiltrate Hogwarts, Ron's skill emerges again. The novel states Ron was hurling hex after hex at the masked figures, his face set with grim determination. While Harry may have been the natural target for Voldemort, Ron's involvement in the defense of the school was vital, and Rowling made certain her readers saw him as a force who could protect himself and his friends. The films, however, often preferred to paint Ron as the unlucky apprentice whose spells misfire. In The Chamber of Secrets, his broken wand becomes a running gag, reducing every attempt to a laugh. Yet even here the book offers nuance. Though the wand indeed malfunctions, Ron still manages to use it to significant effect, most famously when a miscast slug-vomiting charm backfires onto himself. But this accident is not representative of his entire magical education. In fact, it highlights the resilience with which Ron continues to use whatever tools are available to him, even if they are faulty. The humor of the films stripped away that resilience and replaced it with slapstick. There is also the matter of Ron's chess victory in The Philosopher's Stone. While not an example of spellwork, it shows the same qualities that define his approach to magic: tactical thinking, the ability to act under pressure, and courage in sacrifice. Rowling makes it clear that Ron's skills in this area are unique, and Harry and Hermione depend entirely on his judgment. The films show the scene but soften its intensity, neglecting to emphasize how Ron's strategic mind translates into his capacity for magical duels. A boy who can calculate the sacrifice of a knight in wizard chess can also measure the arc of a stunning spell against a moving enemy. Ron's reactions in moments of shock or fear also reveal his magical ability. During the attack of the Death Eaters at the Quidditch World Cup in the Goblet of Fire, Ron's instinct is to protect Ginny and Hermione, not simply to run. He uses his wand effectively, though the situation is chaotic. This detail is diminished in the film, where Ron is mostly shown as confused or passive. The book makes clear that while he is frightened, he is not paralyzed. Courage does not erase fear, and Rowling allows Ron to embody both, giving readers a truer sense of his humanity and his growth as a wizard. One of Ron's strongest demonstrations of spell work appears during the escape from the Ministry of Magic in the Deathly Hallows. With Death Eaters in pursuit, it is Ron's disarming charm that saves them from immediate capture. The book notes, Ron's spell sent the wand spinning high into the air, and Harry caught it. This seamless teamwork between Ron and Harry is not the mark of a sidekick, but of an equal partner in survival. The films chose to spotlight Harry's heroics while muting Ron's competence, flattening a character who had every right to shine. The trust that both Harry and Hermione place in Ron throughout the series is another testimony to his magical reliability. They depend on him in duels, in strategy, and in everyday magic. Hermione may tease him for not revising as rigorously, but she never dismisses his ability in a crisis. The battle sequences in the novels show them acting as a unit, each relying on the other to cover weak points. Ron's inclusion in this triad is not symbolic, it is practical. If he were truly the fumbling wizard of the films, neither Harry nor Hermione would have survived as long as they did by his side. Consider the cave sequence in The Half-Blood Prince, where Dumbledore and Harry seek the Horcrux. Though Ron is absent here, his earlier performance in the books during equally dark challenges foreshadows that he would have stood his ground had he been present. When the trio finally faces similar horrors in the final book, Ron never falters in using his magic to shield, disarm, and hex their enemies. Rowling repeatedly shows him shouting incantations in the thick of danger, his wand movements sharp and decisive. These vivid depictions clash with the film's tendency to cut away from Ron during magical action, often leaving him as a silent background presence. Even his moments of doubt highlight his skill rather than negate it. When Ron briefly abandons the group in the Deathly Hallows, it is not because he lacks magical capacity, but because he struggles with insecurity and the weight of their mission. Upon returning, he demonstrates again just how effective he is, blasting open the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets alongside Hermione to destroy a Horcrux. The novel's description is unambiguous. Ron spoke Parseltongue with surprising ease, and the door yielded. His ability to mimic a magical language and cast spells inside the chamber shows versatility and courage, aspects the films barely acknowledge. The duel at the Battle of Hogwarts is another reminder of Ron's place as Harry's equal in combat. He is not relegated to the sidelines. He stands in the Great Hall, hexing and cursing, his magic flying with lethal intent. Rowling details these scenes with urgency. Ron was beside him, casting spells into the melee, his voice hoarse from shouting incantations. Such passages are vital because they erase the caricature of Ron as a weak link. They present him as a wizard forged in war, capable of matching the energy and ferocity of his peers. What makes the film adaptation particularly misleading is its treatment of Ron's growth. In the books, his progress is clear, each year sharpening his spellwork and confidence. By the later volumes, Ron's magical maturity is undeniable. The movies, however, keep him frozen in a pattern of comic missteps, as if he never moved beyond the boy with the broken wand. This decision robs the character of his arc and the audience of the satisfaction of watching him evolve into a seasoned wizard. The books also allow Ron subtle victories that reflect his magical skill. During their search for Horcruxes, he is the one who saves Harry from drowning in the icy pond when retrieving the sword of Gryffindor. Though this act is physical rather than magical, it reflects his quick thinking and bravery under pressure, the same qualities that fuel his spellcasting in battles. Rowling gives Ron these moments to reinforce that he is indispensable, while the films seem to fear letting him eclipse Harry, even briefly. Ultimately, the novels present Ron as a wizard who might not crave the spotlight, but who commands it when necessary. His spells are not always perfect, but they are effective, and in the most perilous of moments, they save lives. He disarms, he hexes, he shields, and he strikes with the same determination as Harry and Hermione. To overlook this is to miss the true essence of Ron Weasley, not the fumbling comic relief, but the loyal and capable magician whose magic, though understated, burns brightly in the battles that defined his generation. Number 18, A Friend Who Forgives. Ron Weasley's character in the Harry Potter books is layered, messy, contradictory, and deeply human. One of his greatest strengths lies not in his wand, his wit, or even his sense of humor, but in his ability to forgive. This is a quality that J.K. Rowling carefully weaves into his journey, showing a boy who can be petty, insecure, and rash, yet who ultimately returns to the people he loves. Forgiveness for Ron is not passive acceptance. It is a hard-earned triumph of loyalty over pride. In the films, however, much of this struggle is stripped away, leaving viewers with a diminished portrait of a boy who merely changes his mind rather than a young man who wrestles with himself and learns to forgive from the depths of his soul. From the very beginning, Ron is set up as a character who must constantly measure himself against others. He forgives Harry again and again for the unshakable shadow of fame that hangs over their friendship. Ron's jealousy is not trivial. It cuts into his deepest insecurities as the youngest son in a family of overachievers. Harry's name is whispered in corridors, printed in newspapers, and carried like a banner of glory, while Ron feels invisible. Yet in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, when Harry is chosen as seeker for the Gryffindor Quidditch team, Ron does not turn his back. Instead, he cheers the loudest, standing beside him as though Harry's victories were his own. It is in this quiet, often overlooked decision that we see Ron's forgiving heart. He allows his envy to exist, but he never lets it destroy the friendship. The books give us another glimpse in Goblet of Fire, where Ron's anger burns more brightly than ever. Harry's name comes out of the goblet, and Ron cannot believe that his best friend did not secretly enter. "You could have told me," Ron spits in disbelief. He does not speak to Harry for weeks, and the silence feels like a canyon between them. Yet when the first task is over and Ron sees Harry face a dragon, the truth lands hard. Ron had wanted Harry to share everything with him, to make him feel equal, and when that did not happen, he was wounded. But forgiveness wins. Rowling shows this with disarming simplicity. Ron came over, and he looked at Harry and then said, "You've got to be mental." It is a moment not just of reconciliation, but of Ron's willingness to admit fault, to forgive Harry for the pain of feeling left out, and to return as the friend who will stand beside him in the fire. Forgiving Hermione is another story, and perhaps even harder for Ron. His feelings for her are tangled with pride and the terrifying vulnerability of first love. When Hermione attends the Yule Ball with Victor Krum, Ron lashes out in fury. He sees betrayal where there is only independence, and he wounds Hermione deeply with his accusations. For chapters, the tension between them crackles. Yet Ron forgives her too. He never says the words outright, but his actions make it clear. By the time they fight alongside one another in the Department of Mysteries, the anger has dissolved. Forgiveness for Ron does not come from grand declarations, but from a steady return to the bond that matters more than his pride. Even with his sister Ginny, Ron displays this hidden gift. Ginny's stubborn independence frustrates him, especially when she begins dating. His protective instincts collide with her determination to live on her own terms. Ron argues, shouts, and disapproves, but in the end, he forgives her for defying him. Ginny is not a girl who needs his permission, and though Ron struggles to accept this, he ultimately respects her choices. By the time Ginny and Harry become a couple, Ron's forgiveness is complete. He no longer tries to control her, but instead allows her happiness to stand. The films, unfortunately, often skim past these subtle moments. They show Ron as hot-headed, jealous, and occasionally comic relief, but they rarely linger on his act of forgiving. In Goblet of Fire, for instance, the tension between Harry and Ron is quickly brushed aside. What takes chapters of inner turmoil in the book becomes a brief quarrel, ended as though Ron simply changes his mind overnight. The emotional work of forgiveness, the pain, the self-reflection, the decision to return, is left unexplored, flattening Ron's humanity into a shallow arc. The greatest loss comes in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. When Ron abandons Harry and Hermione, it is one of the most painful betrayals of the entire series. The Horcrux lingers on his worst fears, that Harry and Hermione are better off without him, that they do not need him, that he is expendable. The weight of his jealousy and despair is so heavy that he leaves. The book lingers on Harry's devastation and Hermione's quiet grief, showing just how deep Ron's absence cuts. But when Ron returns, it is not simply because he has cooled down, it is because he has chosen love and loyalty over bitterness. "I wanted to come back the minute I'd gone," Ron admits, his voice cracking. "I just didn't know how." This confession is raw, vulnerable, and deeply human. It shows that forgiveness for Ron is not just something he gives to others, but also something he grants himself. He forgives his own weakness in order to step back into the light. The films present this moment differently, reducing it to something closer to regret than transformation. Ron shows up again with little explanation, and his reunion with Harry feels almost casual. The pain of his absence is underplayed, as is the courage it takes to admit fault and ask for forgiveness. What Rowling crafted as a moment of inner triumph, Ron's love, overcoming his insecurity, is glossed over as though it were a plot necessity rather than the heart of his journey. Ron's act of forgiveness in this moment is monumental. He forgives Harry for unintentionally embodying everything Ron feels he cannot be: brave, famous, and effortlessly central. He forgives Hermione for the intimacy she shares with Harry in Ron's absence, an intimacy born not of romance but of shared struggle. Most of all, Ron forgives himself for leaving. Few characters in the series undergo such a quiet but powerful arc of learning to accept their flaws and return to the people they love. This makes Ron one of the most profoundly human characters in the series. What makes this forgiveness so extraordinary is its cost. It is not easy for Ron to swallow his pride, to walk back into that tent and face the friends he hurt. Forgiveness requires humility, and Ron embodies this in a way few others do. The line from the book, "It was the hardest thing I've ever done, coming back," reveals the depth of his struggle. It is not weakness, but strength, the ability to admit fault and to still move forward. In contrast, the films too often cast Ron as a sidekick, whose main role is to provide comic relief or light-hearted tension. His deeper qualities, his loyalty, his forgiving nature, his emotional growth, are muted or lost entirely. This is why so many viewers who only know the films come away with the impression of Ron as lesser, when in truth he is one of the emotional pillars of the trio. Harry might be the chosen one, Hermione the brilliant strategist, but Ron is the heart that forgives and holds them together. In the books, Ron's forgiveness is not limitless or naive. It comes after real pain, anger, and conflict. He does not pretend that betrayals never happened. Instead, he confronts them, feels them, and then makes the conscious choice to let love be stronger than resentment. This is why his character resonates with readers who understand that forgiveness is rarely simple. It demands courage, humility, and a willingness to be hurt again. Ron's greatness lies not in avoiding these struggles, but in choosing to return again and again. This is why the reduction of his forgiveness in the films feels like such a loss. Without the full weight of his inner battles, Ron is presented as a shallow figure, defined by jealousy and humor rather than by his deeper resilience. What Rowling intended as one of the most profound arcs of the series becomes little more than a subplot. Viewers miss the truth. Ron's forgiveness is the glue that binds the trio through every trial, from dragons and Death Eaters to the final walk into the Forbidden Forest. To understand Ron is to understand the complexity of friendship itself. True friendship is not unbroken harmony, but the ability to stumble, to hurt one another, and to return anyway. Rowling shows us that in Ron, forgiveness is not weakness, but the greatest proof of strength. The boy who comes back is braver than the boy who never leaves. And though the films fail to capture this truth, the pages of the books still carry it, waiting for readers to discover the heart of the friend who forgives. Number 19, Ron and the Darkness of Fear. Ron Weasley has often been treated as comic relief in the Harry Potter films, the red-haired sidekick whose purpose is to lighten tense scenes with nervous outbursts or clumsy jokes. Yet the books tell a far richer story, especially when it comes to Ron's relationship with fear. J.K. Rowling never presented him as fearless. Instead, she emphasized how fear shaped his choices, his courage, and ultimately his worthiness as a Gryffindor. The films reduced those complex struggles into exaggerated shrieks, flattening Ron into a character who appears cowardly rather than brave. This misrepresentation is nowhere more obvious than in the way his fear of spiders was handled. In the books, Ron's arachnophobia is not a throwaway gag. It is rooted in his childhood, when Fred and George thought it hilarious to turn his beloved teddy bear into a giant spider. That moment, though described briefly, explains the depth of his phobia. Readers can sympathize. A young child betrayed by brothers he adored was left with an image so terrifying that it haunted him for life. Rowling's prose makes it clear that this isn't mere squeamishness, it is a genuine trauma. When Harry and Ron follow the trail of Aragog in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, the writing stresses Ron's trembling hands, his broken voice, his determination to move forward despite overwhelming dread. The line, "Ron's face was white and his knees were shaking," is not written for comedy. It conveys a boy's battle against paralyzing fear. In contrast, the film adaptation of that same scene turns Ron's terror into an extended joke. His stammering, his overdone shrieks, and his bug-eyed expressions make him appear as the coward of the group, undermining the bravery of facing the forbidden forest filled with giant acromantulas. The cinematic version invites the audience to laugh at Ron rather than respect him. But the book encourages us to admire him precisely because he does not run away. Despite every nerve in his body telling him to flee, Ron follows Harry into that dark nest. He embodies courage in its most authentic form, not the absence of fear, but the decision to keep walking even. When fear threatens to swallow you, the richness of Ron's portrayal is further seen in Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. During the climax, when Sirius Black and Remus Lupin confront Harry in the Shrieking Shack, Ron is injured with a broken leg. Despite his pain and helpless position, he positions himself between Harry and Sirius. He shouts, "If you want to kill Harry, you'll have to kill us too." That single line reveals the essence of Ron's bravery. It is not bravado, it is loyalty and love overpowering terror. On the page, his broken body and shaking voice make the statement resonate as an act of self-sacrifice. In the film, however, this moment is trimmed down and delivered quickly without the same gravity. Ron appears less significant, almost backgrounded, when the book clearly places him in the spotlight of courage. Even the encounter with Boggarts in Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban is a striking example. When Ron faces the shape-shifting creature, it becomes a giant spider, its legs twitching grotesquely. The description is vivid, the spider's eyes gleam, and its body looms toward him. For Ron, this is the physical manifestation of everything he dreads. What matters, however, is what happens next. Guided by Professor Lupin, Ron learns to cast the ridiculous charm, forcing the spider to stumble about on roller skates. The act is both magical and symbolic. Ron literally transforms his deepest fear into something laughable. This is not humiliation, but empowerment. It shows that he has the capacity to confront terror and weaken its hold on him. The films barely dwell on this lesson, presenting it as another slapstick beat, where Ron squeals and the audience chuckles. The subtlety of conquering fear through humor is erased, and his growth is lost in translation. Rowling's depiction of fear extends beyond spiders. Ron struggles constantly with insecurities, being overshadowed by his older brothers, feeling like he never measures up to Harry, doubting whether Hermione truly values him. These are not small worries. They represent the inner fears that eat away at him, shaping his reactions and decisions. When he abandons Harry and Hermione in the Deathly Hallows, it is not out of malice, but because his fears about his family's safety, his insignificance, and his lack of purpose become too heavy to bear. The Locket Horcrux amplifies these fears, whispering poison into his mind. Readers watch Ron crumble, but they also watch him come back. He returns ashamed yet determined, proving that fear does not define him forever. In the film, this arc is simplified, and the insidious voice of the Locket is presented more as jealousy than deep existential dread. The texture of Ron's inner demons is lost. The books consistently remind us that Ron's courage is not innate, but chosen. In Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, when he plays the life-size game of wizard chess, he accepts being sacrificed so Harry can checkmate the king. This is a boy who trembles at spiders, who dreads inadequacy, yet he willingly steps into mortal danger. He declares, "That's chess, you've got to make some sacrifices." Rowling paints the scene. With drama, Ron's pale face illuminated by firelight as the Stone Knight crashes down on him. In the film, though the scene is included, the emotional weight is softened. The sacrifice looks like an exaggerated stunt rather than the trembling bravery of an 11-year-old boy confronting the possibility of death. Another detail often overlooked is Ron's reaction in the Forbidden Forest during detentions in the Philosopher's Stone. When he, Harry, Hermione, Neville, and Draco are paired with Hagrid, Ron is visibly shaken at the idea of going into the woods. He grips his wand tightly, his eyes darting at every sound. Yet he walks, he does not make excuses to leave. Rowling stresses that Ron always continues, even if fear gnaws at him. This repeated motif builds a character who is not the clown sidekick, but a representation of the reader's own fears. We too tremble at the unknown, yet we move forward. That is what makes Ron relatable and heroic. The betrayal of the films lies in how they mock this trait. Instead of portraying a boy who faces fear with gritted teeth, they portray a caricature who screams and whines. The camera lingers on his grimaces and jumps, reducing moments of quiet courage into opportunities for slapstick humor. The audience is invited to laugh, but the truth of Ron's bravery is forgotten. A Gryffindor is not meant to be fearless. A Gryffindor is meant to step forward despite fear. Ron embodies this definition more than almost any character, yet his cinematic counterpart strips him of it. Rowling even foreshadowed this theme with the mirror of Arised. Harry sees his parents, a longing for family, but Ron sees himself as head boy and Quidditch captain holding the house cup. His greatest desire is to be recognized, to escape the fear of being overlooked. This fear of insignificance is not comic, it is profoundly human. The films omit this detail entirely, robbing Ron of the vulnerability that shapes his motivations. By ignoring this fear, the films miss the foundation of his character. Consider also the confrontation at the Ministry of Magic in The Order of the Phoenix. When Ron is hit by brains in the Department of Mysteries, Rowling describes the suffocating tendrils wrapping around him, the terror in his eyes as he struggles. This is not a laughing matter, it is nightmarish imagery. Harry and Hermione fight desperately to free him, but what lingers is Ron's helplessness. Even in moments where he fails, Rowling allows fear to be a teacher. The films, however, downplay this sequence, choosing visual spectacle over emotional depth. Once again, Ron's relationship with fear is erased. The starkest example comes in The Deathly Hallows when Ron destroys the Horcrux. The locket manifests his deepest insecurities, whispering that Harry and Hermione do not need him, that he is nothing but a burden. It even shows visions of Harry and Hermione together, taunting him with betrayal. Rowling writes, Ron raised the sword in trembling hands. This trembling is crucial. He is terrified, weakened by doubt, but he strikes anyway. This is Ron at his most heroic, not in a Quidditch match, not in a duel, but in the vulnerable act of cutting through his own fears. The film depicts the scene, but the psychological torment is rushed. The audience sees flashes of images, but not the slow, suffocating dread that makes Ron's triumph resonate. What we lose in the films is not just accuracy to the books, but the central truth of Ron's character. Fear defines him as much as loyalty does. By overcoming fear again and again, he proves that courage is not about being like Harry, who often rushes headlong into danger, but about being the ordinary boy who chooses to walk into darkness despite trembling. Rowling's Ron is not comic relief. He is the embodiment of the truth that fear and bravery are inseparable. The distortion matters because it changes how generations of viewers perceive Ron Weasley. Those who only know the films may think of him as the cowardly friend, the one who screams at spiders while others save the day. Those who read the books know a different Ron, a boy who quakes with fear, who doubts himself, but who again and again steps forward. His story is one of shadows and light, of trembling knees and steady hands, of fear confronted and conquered. It is the story of what it means to be truly Gryffindor. Number 20. Joker, and nothing more. In J.K. Rowling's books, Ronald Weasley is never just a comic relief character. He is a boy who grows up in the shadow of 6 siblings, each of them extraordinary in their own way, and he develops humor as his shield. In the novels, his wit is not the mark of a fool, but the survival mechanism of someone constantly feeling he has to prove himself. Rowling makes this clear from the very first book, when Ron introduces himself to Harry on the Hogwarts Express. He nervously explains that he has his brother's old wand, his brother's old robes, and even a hand-me-down rat, and then cracks jokes to cover up his embarrassment. Readers see instantly that the jokes are not random. They are a way to hide his insecurity. The films, however, flatten this complexity. They strip away much of the depth and leave the impression that Ron is only present to deliver an awkward laugh. Consider his sharp observations in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. When Harry first experiences how Slytherins look down on others, it is Ron who explains the dangers of Draco Malfoy's arrogance. He makes a mocking imitation of Malfoy's disdain, turning the sting into humor, but the underlying message is serious. He already understands the poisonous pride of certain wizarding families. Rowling allows Ron to act as interpreter for Harry, guiding him through the social hierarchies of Hogwarts. In the movie version, this conversation is trimmed, leaving Ron more like a sidekick who laughs, rather than someone who perceives the hidden rules of the magical world. The feat. Missing detail alters the audience's perception of his importance. The second book provides another example of Ron's subtle depth. When the trio discovers the message about the Chamber of Secrets, Harry feels the weight of suspicion, but Ron reassures him. His line in the novel, "You don't think it was you, do you? No, Harry, I know you," shows that he can recognize his friend's fear and counter it not with sentimentality, but with simple, steady loyalty. He lightens the mood with sarcasm about spiders wanting him to tap dance, a line that becomes famous, but in the book, the joke comes right after an act of friendship. In the film, the sarcasm is highlighted while the reassurance is largely minimized, giving the impression that Ron's role is to break tension rather than to be a source of stability. By the time Prisoner of Azkaban arrives, Ron's bravery becomes more pronounced. He is the one who stands between Harry and Sirius Black in the supposed murderer's first appearance. Despite a broken leg, Ron shouts that if Black wants to kill Harry, he'll have to go through him. The moment is breathtaking on the page, a turning point that shows Ron's courage does not depend on flashy magic, but on loyalty. Yet the film adaptation directs the spotlight onto Harry and Hermione, reducing Ron's act of valor to a background detail. The boy who was willing to risk his life becomes overshadowed by a narrative choice to keep him comic. In Goblet of Fire, the cracks in Ron's friendship with Harry show another side of his complexity. When Harry's name comes out of the goblet, Ron's jealousy is raw. He feels left behind, believing Harry somehow cheated to gain glory. In the book, this conflict is explored with depth. Ron is not just sulking, but expressing years of living in someone else's shadow. He finally voices what has been simmering since childhood. He wants recognition too. Rowling lets Ron be flawed, vulnerable, even unfair, but entirely human. The film brushes past the reasons for his anger, turning the rift into a spat that seems almost petty. The nuance that Ron has long been living under the shadow of both Harry and his brothers is barely visible, again reducing his dimension. Humor in the novels often conceals fear. In Order of the Phoenix, as the students face the tyranny of Dolores Umbridge, Ron constantly uses jokes to push back. When Harry is punished with cruel blood quills, Ron's sarcasm about Umbridge's fairness is biting. His words carry a mixture of bitterness and protectiveness. "She's a foul piece of work, isn't she?" he remarks, his humor more like a weapon than a toy. The films reduce these lines, leaving Harry and Hermione to express outrage, while Ron stands on the side with a nervous grin. The transformation of his sarcasm into silliness reshapes him into a lightweight figure who fails to carry the gravitas he has in the books. The sixth book, Half-Blood Prince, offers perhaps the most striking example of the disservice done to his character. Ron is chosen as Gryffindor's keeper, and though nervous, he battles crippling self-doubt. In the novel, he fights those fears by masking them with jokes, pretending indifference while desperately wanting approval. His tension culminates in the scene where Harry pretends to spike his drink with Felix Felicis. Ron performs spectacularly, believing himself lucky, showing how much his confidence affects his success. This storyline reflects a deep truth about him. Beneath the clowning is a boy who craves self-belief. The film, however, handles the scene with broad comedy. His triumph is shown as accidental, as though his victory comes from bumbling luck rather than resilience. What was meant to reveal Ron's potential becomes another gag. Even his romantic arc is diminished by cinematic choices. In the novels, his awkwardness with Hermione is tender, frustrating, and deeply relatable. He hides feelings under humor, often using sarcasm to mask affection. His jealousy over Victor Crumb is layered with insecurity about his own worth, and the humor he throws out during the Yule Ball is actually a shield against humiliation. In the films, his romance is reduced to awkward stares and goofy jealousy, making him look childish instead of emotionally complex. The subtle interplay between vulnerability and wit is erased. Ron's humour, when read carefully in the books, is also a coping mechanism for danger. During the journey to the Ministry of Magic in Order of the Phoenix, he cracks nervous jokes about thestrals and about walking straight into traps. These moments are not silly, they reveal how he channels terror into levity to keep moving forward. Readers recognize that his humor is survival. The films, however, play these moments for laughs, nudging the audience to chuckle rather than to empathize. The difference changes Ron from a boy struggling with fear into a clown oblivious to danger. Perhaps the most heartbreaking loss comes in the Deathly Hallows. The book shows Ron's inner demons when he leaves Harry and Hermione, tormented by the Horcrux, amplifying his doubts. His departure is dramatic, but his return is even more profound. He saves Harry from drowning in the icy pool when retrieving the sword of Gryffindor. The weight of his earlier abandonment makes his rescue a redemption. His words, "I wanted to come back the minute I'd gone," show sincerity and remorse. The films, while keeping the bare bones of this plot, do not explore his torment or the depth of his return. They cut away much of his emotional struggle, leaving the audience with a shallow arc that reduces his pain to a brief quarrel and reconciliation. When Ron destroys the locket Horcrux, Rowling paints one of the most searing images of his growth. The locket torments him with visions of his deepest fears, Harry and Hermione mocking him, his insignificance within his own family, and his jealousy. He conquers those illusions by striking through them, proving his courage is not in flashy duels, but in conquering insecurity. This scene, rich with symbolism, is the ultimate payoff for his humor and self-doubt across the series. The film rushes it, making the scene more about visual effects than inner conflict. The dark whispers of the locket are played for drama, but Ron's growth is sidelined, once again reducing his humanity. Rowling always made Ron essential to the trio's balance. Harry provides determination, Hermione contributes intellect, and Ron brings grounding humanity. His humor is the glue that prevents despair from swallowing them, but it is also the mask for his own fears. The books never let us forget that he is brave, loyal, and vulnerable beneath the jokes. In one passage, Rowling notes, Ron was the only one who looked cheerful. He kept cracking jokes, determined to keep everyone's spirits up. This shows him consciously using humor to comfort his friends. Without such lines, the films reduce him to a joker who is funny by accident, not a friend who chooses humor as strength. The irony is that the books give Ron some of the most courageous lines in the series, but they rarely made it into the screenplays. His declaration in the first year's chess match, "Do you want to stop Snape from getting the stone or not? We're going to have to sacrifice ourselves," is one of the earliest demonstrations of his bravery. Though included briefly in the film, its weight is minimized, overshadowed by spectacle. What is presented as comic sidekick behavior was, in truth, the actions of a strategist willing to risk himself for victory. Even his role in strategy is overlooked. In the novels, Ron is often the one who notices tactical details, whether in wizard chess or in planning with the DA. His insight is practical and grounded. Rowling uses his background in a large family to make him intuitive about people and situations. The films erase this strategic edge, replacing it with comic timing. The result is that viewers who only know the movies miss an essential truth. Ron is not just there to make us laugh, he is there to keep Harry alive. What remains after comparing page and screen is a pattern of erasure. The serious Ron, the insecure Ron, the fiercely loyal Ron, the Ron who grows into a man of courage, all are thinned down until only the jester remains. Humour was always part of his identity, but it was never the whole. To reduce him to comic relief is to misunderstand the design of the trio. His complexity lies in the fact that he makes us laugh even while carrying pain. It is the tension between laughter and fear that makes him human, and that truth is visible only if one looks back into the pages where Ronald Weasley is not a punchline, but a hero who survives by laughing at the darkness. Number 21. Symbol of friendship. In the pages of J.K. Rowling's novels, Ron Weasley stands as far more than comic relief. He is not just a loyal sidekick who follows Harry into danger. He is the embodiment of friendship itself, the emotional anchor without whom the trio would collapse into imbalance. Harry represents courage and destiny, Hermione represents intelligence and logic, but Ron represents warmth, loyalty, and the ordinary human heart. This essential quality becomes the glue that binds them. In the books, it is obvious that Rowling designed Ron to carry this symbolic weight. Yet when the stories moved from page to screen, much of his depth was stripped away. The films flattened him, trimming away the very aspects that made him the heart of the trio, leaving him a shadow of what he was in the novels. From the beginning, Ron is presented as the first true friend Harry ever has. On the Hogwarts Express in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, their bond begins not through heroism or cleverness, but through the sharing of food. Harry, finally free from the cruelty of the Dursleys, buys an armful of sweets and shares them with Ron, who is embarrassed to reveal his corned beef sandwiches. This act is not glamorous, yet it sets the tone for everything Ron symbolizes. He is the friend who shows Harry what it feels like to belong, who offers not just companionship, but brotherhood. In the book, Rowling writes, Ron's ears went pink. He seemed to think he had said too much because he went back to staring out of the window. This vulnerability makes the friendship real. In the films, however, this moment is rushed, presented almost as a joke rather than the profound birth of loyalty. Ron's bravery in the early challenges of the first year also sets him apart. In the climax beneath the trapdoor, he sacrifices himself on the life-sized wizard's chessboard so that Harry can move forward to face Voldemort. His words, "That's chess, you've got to make some sacrifices. I'll make my move and Harry will be free to check the king," capture a heroic depth that is not rooted in prophecy or intellect, but in loyalty and courage for the sake of a friend. In the book, the scene is tense, painful, and noble, establishing Ron as someone who puts others first. Yet the movie reduces this to a simpler spectacle, cutting away much of the tension and almost skipping over the weight of his decision. Instead of the heart-wrenching act of bravery it was on paper, the film leaves the impression that Ron is merely a piece on the board, not the soul of the sacrifice. As the series develops, Ron's complexity deepens. He is jealous at times, insecure about his place among Harry's greatness and Hermione's brilliance, but these flaws make him human. His doubts are never signs of weakness, but reflections of his symbolic role. He represents the struggle of the ordinary friend who stands beside extraordinary people. In Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, his anger when Harry's name comes out of the goblet reveals this tension. He believes Harry might have entered himself, jealous of the attention once again. Rowling describes it vividly. Ron seemed very keen to avoid Harry's eyes. He gave a short nod and went back to his porridge. This scene demonstrates that true friendship is not flawless. It must endure jealousy, doubt, and reconciliation. The films, however, simplified this arc, making Ron appear petty or foolish rather than painfully human. What is lost most tragically in the cinematic version is Ron's role as comforter. In Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, when Harry is shaken by hearing his mother's dying screams during a Dementor attack, it is Ron who quietly stands by him without judgment. Hermione provides explanations, but Ron provides presence. This subtle companionship is what defines him. Rowling often writes Ron's reactions in physical gestures, his ears turning pink, his silence when Harry struggles, his unspoken support. These details are absent from the films, which often leave Ron either delivering a joke or standing idle while others take the emotional lead. This erases the quiet, binding quality that makes him indispensable. The most striking example of this erasure comes in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. In the books, Ron leaves the trio temporarily, overcome by fear and the influence of the Locket Horcrux, but his return is one of the most powerful affirmations of friendship in the series. He saves Harry from drowning in the icy pool as he tries to retrieve the sword of Gryffindor. His emotional vulnerability is fully revealed when he admits how the locket preyed on his deepest insecurities, his fear of being overshadowed, of not being enough for Hermione. Harry responds, "You've sort of made up for it tonight, getting the sword, finishing off the Horcrux, saving my life." This redemption cements Ron's role as the one who falters, but who always returns because friendship is stronger than fear. The film portrays the event but trims the emotional confession, diluting the symbolic weight of Ron's struggle and triumph. Another injustice the films commit is stealing Ron's moments and giving them to Hermione. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, it is Ron who comforts Harry about his grief for Sirius, and who offers clumsy but genuine words that remind Harry he is not alone. Similarly, in Deathly Hallows, it is Ron who suggests using the basilisk fangs to destroy Horcruxes. Yet in the films, these insights are handed to Hermione, painting her as the sole strategist, while Ron lingers as comic relief. This rewriting undermines Ron's growth and paints an unfair picture of him as expendable, when in truth, Rowling placed vital knowledge and instincts in his hands. Even his romance with Hermione suffers in the transition from book to screen. In the novels, their relationship blossoms gradually, built on years of arguments, misunderstandings, and moments of tenderness that culminate in their kiss during the Battle of Hogwarts. Rowling describes the scene with intensity. There was a clatter as basilisk fangs cascaded out of Hermione's arms. Running at Ron, she flung them around his neck and kissed him full on the mouth. It is not comedic, but passionate, earned through years of friendship and struggle. In the films, however, the moment is altered, staged almost as a humorous afterthought rather than the triumph of affection it was meant to be. By doing so, the films reduce Ron's role, not just as friend, but as a partner, flattening the depth of his bond with Hermione. The imbalance is also visible in how the films portray the trio's dynamic. In the books, Harry is often lost or uncertain, and it is Ron who reassures him in simple, grounded ways. During their hunt for Horcruxes, Ron cracks jokes not to belittle the danger, but to lift the suffocating tension. His humor is a defense mechanism, a reminder that humanity persists even in despair. In Half-Blood Prince, when Harry worries about the future, Ron tells him, "We're with you whatever happens." These words are simple but heavy with meaning. They echo the theme of chosen family, something Harry desperately needs. On screen, however, Ron's humor is exaggerated into buffoonery, and his grounding presence is rarely emphasized, shifting the emotional center almost entirely to Harry and Hermione. Ron's significance becomes clearest when one considers what the trio would be without him. Harry and Hermione represent extremes, courage and intellect, but extremes alone cannot sustain a partnership. Ron is the bridge between them, the ordinary boy who makes them a family. Without him, the group becomes sterile, all mission and no heart. Rowling knew this, which is why she consistently gave Ron the role of mediator. When Harry and Hermione argue, Ron is often the one who diffuses the tension. When the danger becomes unbearable, Ron is the one who cracks the joke that allows them to breathe. This is not weakness. This is the essence of why friendship matters. It is the humanity in the midst of legend. The films rarely show this balance, and so viewers lose sight of the trio as a whole, seeing instead a duo with an extra companion. The depth of Ron's loyalty is written into the very fabric of the series. In Chamber of Secrets, when Harry decides to confront the mystery of the chamber, Ron does not hesitate to follow, even when his wand is broken and his fear is obvious. "If you die down there, you're not getting rid of me that easily," he tells Harry in the book. This line encapsulates his symbolic role. Friendship for Ron is not conditional. It is unwavering, even reckless. This is not the role of a sidekick, but of the very heart that beats life into the narrative, the films. By underplaying or omitting such lines, deprive Ron of the chance to shine as the symbol of devotion he truly is. Even Rowling herself admitted in later interviews that Ron was meant to embody the idea of loyalty over perfection. He is not the smartest or the bravest, but he is the most steadfast. His flaws make him relatable, but his constancy makes him irreplaceable. This is why his diminishment in the films feels so unjust. A generation of viewers who never read the books came away believing Ron was little more than comic relief, missing entirely the deeper lesson Rowling wrote into his character, that friendship is as heroic as prophecy or intellect. By reducing him, the films unintentionally silenced the heartbeat of the story. When we revisit the novels, the difference is striking. Harry without Ron is incomplete. Hermione without Ron is ungrounded. Together, the three of them represent not just a team, but a trinity of qualities: courage, wisdom, and loyalty. Remove one, and the balance falls apart. The films showed us magic, battles, and prophecy, but they failed to capture the quiet, essential truth that Rowling placed in Ron Weasley. He was never meant to be the joke. He was the reason Harry had a friend to walk beside him. He was the symbol of friendship itself, and that is what makes the film's portrayal such a loss. Number 22, a true Quidditch player. Ron Weasley's journey as a Quidditch player is one of the most underestimated arcs in the Harry Potter series, especially when comparing the depth of J.K. Rowling's writing to the oversimplified treatment in the films. The movies often reduce Ron to comic relief, showing him fumbling on his broomstick, trembling at the sight of the quaffle, or being distracted by his insecurities to the point of near parody. Yet within the books, Rowling builds a layered story of self-doubt, resilience, and eventual triumph that mirrors Ron's larger role as Harry's steadfast friend. The mismatch is so stark that for many viewers who have never read the books, Ron seems like a liability on the pitch, when in truth he becomes a champion of Gryffindor House. The first striking example comes in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, where Ron is introduced to Quidditch in a much more serious capacity. Rowling does not present him as a natural-born athlete like Harry or a quick strategist like Oliver Wood, but rather as a boy plagued by nerves and the crushing weight of comparison. His brothers, Fred and George, are legendary beaters. Charlie had once been captain of the team. Percy, though not an athlete, was an overachiever in academics. Ron, standing in their shadow, longed for a chance to prove himself. The book describes his struggle vividly. Ron was the least loved brother. He had no special talent to distinguish him. That insecurity bleeds into his early Quidditch performances. He misses saves. He shakes when the crowd chants, "Weasley is our king," in mockery, and he contemplates quitting. None of these moments are funny in the books. They are painful, deeply human reminders of how fear of failure can paralyze even the most determined person. The chant, Weasley is our king, a centerpiece of Ron's arc, is handled entirely differently in the adaptation. In Rowling's narrative, it begins as a cruel taunt from Slytherins. Weasley was born in a bin. He always lets the quaffle in. For Ron, each syllable stings. His ears turn red, his hands shake, and he doubts his worthiness to wear the keeper's gloves. However, by the end of the season, when Gryffindor wins the Quidditch Cup under his defense, the song is transformed. His housemates sing it in victory, reclaiming. As praise, Weasley is our king. He never lets the quaffle in. It is a moment of poetic reversal, a transformation of ridicule into pride. This is one of Rowling's most brilliant character beats, yet in the films it is reduced to a passing gag. The films never grant Ron the catharsis of hearing the same words that once humiliated him sung as a chorus of admiration. Without that, his journey loses its resonance. Another critical moment comes in Half-Blood Prince, when Gryffindor faces Slytherin in a match that could determine the cup. Rowling sets the scene with extraordinary tension. Ron, desperate to shake his nerves, unknowingly drinks pumpkin juice laced with what he believes to be Felix Felicis, the liquid luck potion. His performance is dazzling. He blocks goals with ease, showing reflexes and bravery that silence his critics. The catch, of course, is that he was never under the potion's influence at all. Hermione later reveals Harry only pretended to spike Ron's drink. The magic was inside Ron all along. His belief in himself unlocked his potential. The passage reads, "For the first time in his life, Ron was playing like a keeper truly possessed. Nothing, it seemed, could get past him." This victory is not just about a game, it is the culmination of his struggle against insecurity. By contrast, the film presents it as an awkward comedy of errors, focusing on Ron's accidental heroics rather than his genuine growth. What the books make clear and the films obscure is that Ron's triumph in Quidditch is not merely athletic, it is symbolic of his internal battle. He has always been the friend in the background, overshadowed by Harry's fame and Hermione's brilliance. Quidditch gave him a personal stage where his actions alone determined success or failure. Rowling treats this with gravity because Ron represents the archetype of the underdog. When he lifts the Quidditch Cup, he is not only winning for Gryffindor, he is finally escaping the prison of self-doubt. The reader can feel the rush of vindication when Gryffindor cheers for him. It is a story of resilience that resonates with anyone who has ever felt overshadowed. The reduction of this arc in the films does a disservice not only to Ron, but to the theme of perseverance in the entire series. Quidditch is not just a sport in Rowling's world, it is a narrative mirror. Harry's victories show courage under pressure. Ginny's skill displays independence and strength. Ron's journey reveals the cost of insecurity and the sweetness of overcoming it. By turning his scenes into slapstick comedy, the films rob the story of one of its strongest examples of character development through sport. Instead of seeing a young man conquer fear, the audience sees a bumbling figure lucky to survive. Consider the comparison with Neville Longbottom. In both books and films, Neville is shown as nervous and clumsy at first, only to grow into a hero who slays Nagini in the final battle. Audiences celebrated his evolution because the films honored it. Ron, however, is denied the same respect. His growth on the pitch is downplayed, his victories minimized, and his arc largely forgotten outside of die-hard readers. Ironically, Ron and Neville share the same narrative DNA, ordinary boys who prove themselves extraordinary, but only one of them is allowed the full dignity of that journey on screen. One particularly painful omission is the atmosphere Rowling creates in Gryffindor Tower after Ron's victories. In the book, The celebration of his performance is electric. Harry sees his best friend lifted on shoulders, his name chanted as if he were the savior of the match. Hermione beams with pride. Even the portraits cheer. It is a rare moment when Ron is the center of admiration without qualification. These vivid scenes allow readers to bask in the glow of Ron's hard-won achievement. The film, however, skips much of this triumph, opting instead for short comedic snippets that suggest Ron succeeded by accident rather than skill. This misrepresentation weakens the emotional payoff of his struggle. Furthermore, Rowling carefully crafts Ron's mistakes as integral to his growth. He falters, yes, he misses goals, he panics under pressure, and he nearly costs his team points, but these failures are written not as permanent traits but as stepping stones toward maturity. In Order of the Phoenix, he nearly walks away from Quidditch because the jeering gets too much, yet he returns, determined to do better. This resilience is what makes his later victories meaningful. By portraying his failures only as jokes, the films strip away the dignity of his persistence. Viewers laugh at him, readers root for him. There is also the subtle narrative point that Rowling draws between Ron's Quidditch journey and his place in the trio. Just as he doubts whether he deserves the keeper position, he doubts whether he belongs at Harry's side. He wonders if he is only the sidekick, destined to fade into the shadows of greater heroes. His triumph in Quidditch echoes his importance in the larger story. He may stumble, but when it counts, he stands tall. The films, in undercutting his sporting achievements, also erode this symbolic parallel, making Ron appear more expendable than he truly is. The fact that Rowling herself included multiple Quidditch matches with Ron as keeper shows her intent. These chapters are not filler. They are designed to show Ron earning his own glory independent of Harry's. The novels allow space for that development. When Gryffindor finally wins the cup with Ron as the last line of defense, it is more than sport. It is vindication. Readers cheer because they know what it cost him to get there. Every sneer, every missed save, every restless night of doubt. To erase or downplay that in the adaptations is to erase part of his soul. Even Harry's own perspective on Ron's Quidditch role highlights its importance. In the books, Harry often reflects on how proud he is of Ron, even when he falters. He knows what it means for his friend to push past fear. In Half-Blood Prince, Harry's ruse with Felix Felicis is not a joke, it is an act of brotherly care. He gives Ron the confidence to shine, knowing his friend only needed belief. That kind of faith and trust deepens their friendship. In the films, this becomes little more than a visual gag, stripping away the emotional resonance between the two characters. Quidditch is a proving ground for Ron's courage. He never had the natural brilliance of Hermione or the chosen one aura of Harry. What he had was heart, persistence, and the desperate longing to matter. On the pitch, he discovers that those qualities are enough. Rowling rewards him with moments of genuine greatness, moments where Gryffindor's fate depends not on Harry's seeker skills, but on Ron's determination as keeper. Those chapters are not just about sport, they are about identity. By laughing at his efforts, the films rob him of that identity. Ultimately, the distortion of Ron's Quidditch arc in the films contributes to a wider misunderstanding of his character. To readers, Ron is not a clown. He is a flawed but brave young man who learns to overcome his doubts and rise to occasions bigger than himself. His victories on the Quidditch pitch are metaphors for every battle he fights against insecurity, jealousy, and fear. When Gryffindor raises the cup with Ron at the heart of the defense, it is not simply a school sporting event. It is a triumph of the underestimated, a victory for every boy and girl who has ever wondered if they were good enough. The films missed this truth, but the books preserve it in every soaring save and every roaring cheer that echoed through the Gryffindor stands. Number 23. A man who can laugh at himself. In the pages of J.K. Rowling's novels, Ron Weasley emerges as one of the most human characters of the trio. He is not extraordinary in wealth, nor is he destined by prophecy, nor does he possess Hermione's brilliance. What makes Ron stand out is his ability to carry these shortcomings lightly, to laugh at himself in moments when another person might collapse into bitterness. Rowling paints him as someone painfully aware of being the sixth son, the one wearing hand-me-down robes and using a chipped wand, but she also gives him the resilience of humour. This self-irony is not the shield of a cynic, but the survival tool of a boy who knows his worth despite everything. In contrast, the films repeatedly portray Ron as a sulking shadow, unable to bear the weight of his own insecurities, stripping away the warmth of self-deprecation that made him so endearing on the page. One of the clearest examples appears in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. In the book, when Ron's wand is broken after the flying car crash, he does not drown in self-pity. Instead, he mutters with dry humour about the disaster of his magical education. Later, when the broken wand backfires during Professor Lockhart's dueling club, shooting a spell back at him and covering him with slime, Ron does not spiral into despair. Rowling writes that the jet of green light shot out of the wrong end of Ron's wand, hitting him squarely between the eyes. He gave a great oof, and green slime dripped down his nose. The humour is immediate, and Ron shares in the absurdity of his own misfortune. In the film version, however, the same moment leans into humiliation rather than laughter. Rupert Grint is made to look like the butt of a cruel joke with exaggerated disgust rather than wry acceptance. The essential trait of self-irony evaporates, leaving only embarrassment. Rowling gave Ron the precious ability to name his weaknesses without losing spirit. In The Goblet of Fire, when Harry is chosen as champion, Ron is consumed by jealousy at first, yet even here, Rowling balances the bitterness with moments of humour. Once the rift is healed, Ron is able to joke about his position in Harry's shadow. He quips about being the stupid friend who tags along, and admits it with a smile, turning his own envy into a source of laughter rather than resentment. That is the Ron who survives in the books, bruised but never broken, willing to laugh at himself as a way of rejoining his friends. In the film, however, this dynamic reduces him to a whiner. Instead of showing a boy capable of making light of his insecurities, the adaptation tilts the scale toward pouting and sulking, leaving audiences with the impression of a character weaker than he truly is. It is not accidental that Rowling used Ron's self-irony as a narrative balance within the trio. Harry carries the weight of destiny, Hermione shoulders the perfection of intellect, and Ron embodies the everyman, reminding the reader that imperfection can coexist with loyalty and courage. The humour he directs at himself makes the trio believable. For instance, in Prisoner of Azkaban, when Hermione slaps Draco Malfoy and Ron exclaims, "Can I give you a medal?" His laughter is not just at Draco's humiliation, but also at his own inability to act with such boldness. He makes light of his own cowardice in that moment, but without shame. The film keeps the slap, but drains Ron's remark of its tone, turning his presence into little more than comic relief, rather than a character expressing ironic admiration at his own expense. Perhaps one of the most moving examples of Ron's self-irony comes in Order of the Phoenix, when he becomes a keeper on the Gryffindor Quidditch team. His nerves nearly consume him, but once the match is over and he has performed decently, Ron can laugh at his trembling hands and the way he nearly fell off his broom. Rowling writes his victory as fragile but real, with Ron admitting his fear and still finding humor in his awkwardness. The film adaptation, however, emphasizes his incompetence to the point of mockery. Instead of a boy who recognizes his weaknesses and turns them into self-deprecating humor, the audience sees someone perpetually failing, a caricature rather than a character with resilience. What is lost in translation from book to screen is not merely a trait, but a worldview. Ron's self-irony is his way of coping with the fact that he is the sixth son in a family where achievements seem to have been claimed by older siblings long before his turn. In the books, he often jokes about it, telling Harry with a grin that his mother barely notices when he accomplishes something because it has all been done before. Everyone expects me to do as well as the others, but if I do, it's no big deal because they did it first, he says in Philosopher's Stone. The sadness is real, but the way Ron voices it carries irony and humor. He makes his pain bearable by transforming it into a joke, which is precisely what gives his character emotional depth. The films reduce this confession into whining complaints, focusing on resentment rather than laughter, and in doing so they flatten the character. Even when facing danger, Ron's humor is his lifeline. During the hunt for Horcruxes in Deathly Hallows, after returning to the trio following his moment of desertion, Ron does not wallow in shame. He begins to make fun of himself almost immediately. When Harry explains how he destroyed the locket, Ron interrupts with self-mocking incredulity about his role, joking that his dramatic rescue with the sword of Gryffindor was hardly graceful. Rowling grants him redemption through laughter, showing that his return is not only an act of courage, but also an acknowledgement of his flawed humanity. In the film, however, the moment becomes heavy with guilt and shame, and Ron's humor is muted. The boy who laughs at his own blunders becomes a man burdened by regret, and the essence of his survival mechanism is lost. The distinction matters because Rowling never intended Ron to be pitiful. She designed him as the anchor between Harry's destiny and Hermione's intellect. His self-irony is the glue that allows the trio to withstand tension. In the books, when Ron mocks his own lack of skill at spells compared to Hermione, it is not self-destruction, but acceptance. He teases himself with a grin, and in doing so he also elevates Hermione's brilliance without resentment. In the films, however, his remarks are presented with bitterness, as though he envies her to the point of frustration. What was once affectionate humor becomes petty jealousy, changing the chemistry of the trio in subtle but significant ways. It is worth noting that Rupert Grint, as an actor, delivered much of the comedic timing with natural brilliance. Yet the direction and script often forced his character into the role of comic relief sidekick, stripping away the texture of self-awareness that Rowling built. A scene like the infamous canary attack in Half-Blood Prince, when Hermione releases a flock of conjured birds on him after his romance with Lavender, becomes a joke at his expense. In the book, Ron later laughs awkwardly at the absurdity of being mauled by birds, demonstrating his ability to turn even humiliation into humor. The film chooses instead to dwell on his discomfort, offering no redemption through laughter, only awkward silence. What is tragic about this alteration is that readers lose sight of Ron's resilience. Self-irony is a form of strength. It is the ability to admit one's faults without surrendering to despair. When Ron, in Chamber of Secrets, describes his family's ghoul as the house pet, mocking the ridiculousness of their poverty with a laugh, he is not begging for sympathy. He is claiming joy in spite of lack. That is what made him beloved to generations of readers. On screen, however, poverty becomes humiliation. His patched robes and hand-me-downs are not transformed by humor, but highlighted as evidence of inferiority. The boy who jokes about his shabby wand is replaced by one who sulks about it, and in that shift, a core element of his character disappears. The films also exaggerate Ron's role as cowardly. In the books, he constantly makes jokes about his own fears. When faced with giant spiders in Chamber of Secrets, Ron's terror is palpable, but afterward he jokes about never following butterflies again. Rowling ensures that the reader sees not only the fear, but the humor in surviving it. The film dwells on his screaming and stumbling, presenting him as hapless. The difference may seem small, but it changes the narrative. In the books, Ron is a boy who can laugh at his fear. In the films, he is simply a coward. This misrepresentation reshapes audience perception. Viewers who know Ron only from the films often describe him as jealous, incompetent, and whiny. Readers, however, recall a character who brought laughter into the darkest corridors of Hogwarts, who bore his insecurities with humor, who reminded everyone that imperfection could coexist with bravery. The transformation is not subtle but profound, erasing the self-ironic resilience that defined his character. What remains is an echo of the real Ron, a shadow reduced to comic sidekick, robbed of the dignity that comes from being able to laugh at oneself. Ultimately, the difference between book Ron and film Ron lies in this ability to transform weakness into humor. Rowling gave him the gift of self-irony as a mark of strength, a way to navigate poverty, family overshadowing, and fear without being consumed by them. The films, in turning that humor into humiliation, misrepresented not just his character, but the very dynamic of the trio. Where the books showed a boy laughing at his flaws and moving forward, the screen showed a boy drowning in them. And so, one of the most human, relatable, and resilient traits in the series was lost in translation. Number 24, a shoulder for Harry. In J.K. Rowling's books, Ron Weasley is not just comic relief, nor simply the boy who provides moments of clumsy humor to balance the darker tone. He is the anchor Harry leans on when the weight of destiny becomes too heavy. Readers see that when Harry feels overwhelmed by fear, grief, or uncertainty, Ron becomes the silent presence who doesn't demand answers, doesn't push for logic, but simply exists as proof that Harry is not alone. This aspect of Ron is understated but crucial, and it is precisely what made his bond with Harry so powerful in the novels. Yet when the stories were brought to the screen, the filmmakers often shifted these moments onto Hermione, leaving Ron flattened into a supporting role defined by jokes and occasional outbursts. One of the earliest and clearest examples comes in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. After Harry learns about the Mirror of Erised, he is shaken to the core by seeing his parents' reflections. Hermione, ever rational, warns him not to dwell on it, but it is Ron who sits beside him afterward, reminding him indirectly of the life he does have, talking about his own family, about his longing to be more than just the sixth son. The book describes Ron's words about being head boy and Quidditch captain as simple dreams, but in them lies comfort. Harry sees that Ron shares vulnerability with him, that neither of them is perfect, but together they carry each other. This emotional honesty is entirely Ron's gift. In the film, however, the scene is stripped down and the comfort Ron provides is minimized, reducing his role to the boy who wants Quidditch glory. The same distortion happens in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. When Harry fears that he might be the heir of Slytherin, Hermione approaches the matter academically, analyzing evidence and reassuring with logic. But it is Ron who bluntly states, "You've got to be barking mad to think it's you." His humor cuts through Harry's self-doubt. Ron's support here is instinctive, the kind that only a true friend can offer. He doesn't produce research, doesn't try to solve the puzzle, but he takes Harry's fear seriously and answers it in the only way Harry needs, by dismissing it as ridiculous. On film, this moment is handed off awkwardly, and Ron is relegated to reacting in fear to spiders or making a joke about puking slugs, stripping away the depth that the text carefully builds. By Prisoner of Azkaban, Ron's role as Harry's emotional shoulder becomes even more visible. The revelation that Sirius Black has escaped sends shockwaves through Hogwarts. Hermione constantly reminds Harry to follow rules and stay cautious. Yet it is Ron who whispers that Harry should not face it all alone, that if he is going after Black, Ron is going too. Rowling writes Ron as unflinching in his loyalty, even when danger is certain. In the Shrieking Shack, when Sirius advances on Harry, it is Ron, lying injured with a broken leg, who shouts that if Sirius wants Harry, you'll have to kill us too. This is the purest form of emotional support. Standing between your best friend and death itself. In the film, while this scene is present, its intensity is undercut by tone and framing, and the raw emotional courage of Ron is not emphasized as much as Harry's confrontation with Sirius and Lupin. The Goblet of Fire complicates their friendship with jealousy and anger. Ron's feelings of inadequacy burst to the surface when Harry is chosen as a Triwizard champion. The beauty of the book's portrayal is that despite his resentment, Ron's absence hurts Harry more than anything. Hermione cannot fill that space because her approach is intellectual. She tells Harry to ignore gossip. Ron's silence, however, is a wound that lingers. When they reconcile, Harry realizes how much he depends on Ron's presence, how much it means to have him at his side. The film adaptation reduces this reconciliation into a quick exchange, almost comedic, losing the gravity of what Ron's companionship truly means to Harry. In Order of the Phoenix, Harry struggles with anger and trauma, haunted by Cedric's death and Voldemort's return. Hermione constantly lectures him on the importance of restraint, often making Harry feel more isolated. Ron, however, offers quiet solidarity. He does not have the wisdom to solve Harry's inner turmoil, but his very willingness to stand with Harry in silence is healing. When the whole school doubts Harry's story, Ron is there on the Gryffindor common room couch, simply listening. Rowling shows us that Harry's greatest relief often comes not from advice, but from Ron's unspoken loyalty. In the film, however, it is Hermione who steps into this role, offering reassurances and defending Harry in ways that belong to Ron in the books. The situation becomes even more striking in Half-Blood Prince. Harry discovers the prophecy, learns he must be the one to kill Voldemort, and feels crushed by the enormity of fate. In the books, Ron absorbs this revelation with empathy, offering words that may not be profound but are grounding. He reassures Harry that he is not alone, that he has friends who will fight with him until the end. In the film, these words are instead woven into Hermione's dialogue, while Ron is reduced to the boy entangled in a comic love triangle with Lavender Brown. What is lost is Ron's central place in Harry's emotional survival. When the series reaches its climax in Deathly Hallows, the weight of Ron's role becomes undeniable. The trio's time in the forest is defined by hunger, fear, and despair. Ron cracks under the strain, leaving Harry and Hermione, but his eventual return is more than redemption. It is proof of his central role as Harry's companion. Rowling writes that Ron stands as if he has been burned alive by guilt, desperate to prove he is still the friend Harry needs. When he destroys the locket Horcrux, the vision of Harry and Hermione mocking him with his deepest insecurities breaks him to pieces. Yet it also affirms that his loyalty, once restored, is unshakable. Ron's quiet presence after this is the backbone of Harry's resilience. The films touch on this arc, but soften its depth, trimming away Ron's emotional gravity in favor of pacing and visual spectacle. The books emphasize Ron's role in small, intimate moments that never made it to the screen. When Harry grieves over Sirius's death at the end of Order of the Phoenix, Hermione speaks of what Dumbledore said and rationalizes fate. Ron, on the other hand, just sits with Harry, not asking him to talk, not demanding explanations, but being there. Rowling captures the essence of true friendship in those quiet acts of solidarity. Harry does not need words, he needs presence. In the films, however, those moments often fade into the background, making Ron appear less significant. Even in moments of laughter, Ron's function as Harry's shoulder shines. In the books, his humor is never just comedic relief. It is a lifeline, pulling Harry back from the abyss. After nightmarish visions or encounters with death, Ron cracks jokes that remind Harry that life continues, that there is still room for normal teenage foolishness. Rowling crafts these interludes carefully, giving Ron the power to balance the tone of the narrative. In the movies, those jokes often became his defining trait, without the emotional context that made them meaningful. This distortion affects how audiences perceive the trio's dynamic. In the books, Harry leans on Ron for emotional stability and on Hermione for intellectual guidance, making them two halves of his support system. On screen, Hermione is allowed to embody both logic and emotional depth, while Ron is left to embody insecurity and humor. The imbalance diminishes not only Ron's importance, but also the authenticity of Harry's friendships. Viewers walk away thinking Ron is expendable, when in truth, the novels show that Harry would never have endured without him. The neglect of Ron's role in the films also impacts Hermione's character unintentionally. By shifting Ron's supportive moments onto her, the films portray Hermione as less flawed, more idealized, and almost too perfect. In the books, she is brilliant but not emotionally intuitive, often struggling to understand Harry's feelings. This makes her human. By giving her Ron's lines of comfort, the adaptations create a character closer to an ideal archetype rather than a believable friend with her own blind spots. Ron's emotional role also ties deeply into the theme of ordinary bravery. He is not the chosen one or the brightest witch of her age. He is a boy with fears, insecurities, and jealousy, yet he repeatedly chooses to stay at Harry's side. His courage is not inborn but chosen, which makes it all the more powerful. Stripping that away in the films removes one of the most human lessons Rowling threaded into her story: that friendship and loyalty, even from someone imperfect, can carry a hero through the darkest battles. At the heart of the books lies a simple truth. Harry may be the hero, but Ron is the friend who holds him upright when destiny threatens to crush him. He is not perfect, not always eloquent, but he is present. Rowling captured the essence of what it means to be a true companion, someone who may not know the right words, but knows the importance of staying. In transferring this bond to the screen, too much of Ron's presence was lost, leaving audiences with an incomplete picture of what kept Harry Potter standing. Number 25. Courage in small things. Ron Weasley has long been misunderstood in the cinematic version of Harry Potter, and much of this misunderstanding comes from how the films stripped away the texture of his bravery. In the books, Ron is not a mere sidekick whose main role is comic relief or to serve as Harry's anxious counterpart. He is a boy whose courage is expressed not only in battles with Death Eaters or during grand duels, but in the small daily acts of defiance that J.K. Rowling took care to highlight. These everyday gestures are where his character breathes most vividly. They reveal the essence of bravery as more than wielding a wand in the face of mortal danger. It is the steady choice to stand tall even when humiliation, ridicule, or even minor punishments could easily make one back down. From the very beginning, Rowling shows Ron as someone willing to step into uncomfortable territory for the sake of others. In Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, he defends Hermione Granger after her vulnerability is exposed. She is mocked for being a know-it-all, and Ron is the one who sneers at Draco Malfoy and others who push her down with words. While the film adaptation reduces his role in this scene to a throwaway insult, the book shows Ron as a boy who bristles when injustice is near. He may not always be tactful, but his willingness to risk embarrassment in front of classmates is a kind of everyday courage. It is easier to remain silent when someone is mocked, but Ron chooses noise and confrontation. Consider his repeated clashes with Draco Malfoy. In Chamber of Secrets, when Draco calls Hermione a filthy little mudblood, it is Ron who loses his temper so completely that he tries to hex Malfoy despite his broken wand. The curse rebounds and backfires, leaving him vomiting slugs, a scene turned into comedic exaggeration in the film. Yet the book makes clear what drives him: fury that someone would insult his friend in such a vile way. Ron does not hesitate, even though Malfoy is flanked by Crabbe and Goyle, and even though his own wand is unreliable. This impulsive act is pure bravery, the kind that springs from instinct rather than calculation. Harry may be the chosen one, but it is Ron who cannot sit still when cruelty is in the air. His clashes with authority, too, show bravery of another kind. In Prisoner of Azkaban, he dares to argue back against Professor Snape, a teacher who thrives on humiliating students. When Snape unfairly ridicules Harry, Ron mutters insults under his breath and sometimes speaks aloud in protest. This is not the courage of dueling Voldemort. It is the quieter but equally essential courage of speaking against power, even when the punishment could mean losing points for Gryffindor or enduring detention. The films largely suppress this side of Ron, making him appear cowed in the presence of professors, while the books establish him as someone who cannot hold his tongue in the face of bullying, even when the bully wears a teacher's cloak. The chess game in Philosopher's Stone remains one of the clearest demonstrations of Ron's courage, yet even here the films shift the focus. In the book, Ron takes the lead, understanding the danger and deliberately placing himself in harm's way so that Harry and Hermione can continue. His words ring with quiet determination. "That's chess! You've got to make some sacrifices." He rides into danger knowing he will be struck, and when the enchanted knight's blow knocks him unconscious, it is the culmination of strategic bravery and self-sacrifice. The film does include the scene, but it frames it in a way that feels rushed, almost comedic. It never lingers on the true weight of Ron's choice, a boy of 11 volunteering to be injured so his friends can succeed. Rowling continuously threads these small acts of defiance through Ron's story, building a portrait of bravery that is not obvious at first glance. In Goblet of Fire, his courage shows in the way he wrestles with his insecurities about Harry's fame. He breaks away from Harry in anger after believing he entered the Triwizard Tournament without telling him, but when faced with the terrifying reality of Harry's danger, he admits his mistake and supports him fully. Apologizing and standing by a friend may not seem as thrilling as facing dragons, yet it is a braver act than many notice. Ron shows that courage often lies in overcoming pride, swallowing shame, and mending bonds even when one feels small and overshadowed. In Order of the Phoenix, when the group faces ridicule at Hogwarts for supporting Harry's story of Voldemort's return, Ron is consistently at Harry's side. He is mocked, laughed at, and dismissed as part of a delusional trio, but he does not waver. When he becomes a prefect, many students sneer that he was chosen only because Harry could not be. Yet Ron accepts the role, patrolling corridors and enforcing rules, even when it earns him the resentment of his peers. This kind of courage is unglamorous but deeply telling. It shows Ron willing to endure social discomfort and even loneliness for the sake of responsibility. The films, however, gloss over this, stripping Ron of his prefect status entirely, a small but telling erasure of his subtle growth.